Flames stretched across the ruins of Earth, licking at the skeletal remains of cities that had once been monuments to human ambition. The sky, thick with soot and the drifting carcasses of ships that had dared to defy the inevitable, bore silent witness to the final moments of the resistance. What had been a war was now a massacre, and what had been defiance was now silence. The end had come. Elias Vance crouched behind the shattered husk of a troop carrier, gripping the scorched metal as heat pulsed from the smoldering wreckage. His breath came sharp, measured, his pulse steady despite the carnage unfolding around him. Years of training had burned fear out of him. Fear was a luxury of the unprepared. "Still breathing, Captain?" The voice crackled in his earpiece, steady, calm. A voice built for war. "Barely," Elias muttered, scanning the street ahead. What had once been a thoroughfare was now a corridor of the dead. Bodies, human and alien, lay in grotesque disarray, steam rising from fresh wounds, armor cracked, weapons scattered like offerings to an indifferent sky. The smell of charred flesh turned the air acrid. He had long since stopped noticing. Across the street, the remaining members of his unit waited for his signal. There weren't many left. Hadn't been for a long time. Just men who refused to die, who carried the ghosts of the fallen in the weight of their silence. Sergeant Cole tapped his wristpad, highlighting enemy positions on the augmented display in Elias' visor. Patrol coming up the alley, 6 hostiles. 1 heavy. Elias exhaled slowly. "We're not making it out of this." Cole smirked, blood smeared across his cheek like war paint. "Yeah? Then let's make sure they don't either." They moved like ghosts, slipping between ruined structures, the crunch of debris beneath their boots masked by the howl of distant explosions. The enemy moved with mechanical precision, their towering frames wrapped in dull black armor, their rifles humming with latent energy. The Yevothin did not rush. They did not falter. They had taken world after world with the cold inevitability of an avalanche. And now Earth was theirs, except Elias still breathed, and that meant the war wasn't over. The first shot came from the shadows, a single round tearing through the skull of the lead alien. It dropped without a sound, and before the others could react, the street erupted with gunfire. The air split with the shriek of plasma bolts, streaking through the dust and smoke. Elias pressed forward, weaving between cover, his rifle kicking against his shoulder as he put 2 rounds through the chest of another Yevothin. The heavy trooper turned, energy shielding flaring as it absorbed the brunt of the attack. It raised its weapon, but Elias was already moving, diving low, rolling beneath the burning wreck of a transport. A heartbeat later, an explosion ripped through the alley as Cole lobbed a charge straight into the brute's chest. Then silence. Elias pushed himself up, breathing hard. Cole grinned. "Still alive." "Unfortunately," Elias muttered, scanning the horizon. More would come. They always did. A chime in his earpiece made him freeze. Not a human signal. A Yevothin transmission. He tapped his wristpad, patching into the frequency, his visor translating the guttural syllables into cold, precise text. Human resistance eliminated. Sector secured. Final offensive complete. Elias felt something tighten in his chest. He turned his gaze upward. Beyond the layers of smog and fire, the sky pulsed with the light of 1,000 warships in perfect formation. They had won. Cole read the message over his shoulder. "They really think that was the last of us?" Elias didn't answer. He was looking past the fleet, past the death hanging over them, at the ground beneath his feet. His visor flickered, picking up energy readings that should not have been there. Deep below the surface, something stirred. Another explosion rocked the city, but this one did not come from the Yevothin. The ground shuddered, and for the first time since the invasion began, the enemy hesitated. Their ships, their soldiers, their cold calculations, none of it accounted for the unknown. Cole frowned. "Captain, what the hell is that?" Elias watched as the reading spiked, his display filled with errors, warnings, interference so strong it drowned out the enemy's signals. Whatever lay beneath them, it was waking up, and it was angry. Darkness swallowed the ruins of Earth, the sky a thick, churning void where once there had been stars. What remained of humanity had learned to live beneath it, in tunnels carved from the bones of the old world, in bunkers built for wars that had never come, at least not the ones they had expected. The enemy had left, believing their conquest complete, leaving behind a graveyard. But they had not buried the dead deep enough. Elias Vance moved through the tunnels, his boots silent on damp stone, rifle slung across his back. The air was stale, thick with the scent of sweat and metal, of men who had spent too long in the dark. The survivors had gathered here, beneath the wreckage, beneath the notice of the enemy that had moved on to greater conquests. They whispered of vengeance, of plans stitched together from scavenged technology and stolen data. They did not mourn. They prepared. At the heart of the bunker, a makeshift command center hummed with the glow of stolen Yevothan consoles. Lines of alien script scrolled across screens, translated into sharp, precise warnings. Fleet movements, patrol routes, supply chains. They had tapped into the enemy's network, not enough to be noticed, but enough to listen. And what they heard made their next move clear. Sergeant Cole leaned against a console, arms crossed, eyes tired but sharp. "They think we're gone." His voice was edged with something close to amusement. "Idiots." Elias studied the data, the points of weakness in the Yevothan occupation. They had left automated sentries, a few scattered garrisons, but nothing more. To them, the war was over. Humanity was a footnote. A woman's voice cut through the room, calm and analytical. "If we hit their supply chain, we cut off their ability to expand. They're moving resources to the outer colonies, leaving just enough here to maintain control." Dr. Samantha Rourke had once been a researcher in experimental warfare, back when Earth still had governments, still had the luxury of theoretical battles. Now, theory had become necessity. Her mind had gone from crafting defense strategies to dismantling the enemy's technological edge, one stolen blueprint at a time. Elias nodded, fingers tapping against the metal surface of the table. "A strike on their transport hub. Small, precise. We take out their logistics, they'll have to look at us again." Cole grinned. "And when they do?" Elias met his gaze. "We show them what they missed." Hours later, they moved through the ruins under the cover of night, navigating through crumbling streets where only the wind dared to whisper. The Yevothan drones patrolled in steady arcs, scanning for life that was no longer supposed to exist. They moved in silence, using the enemy's own blind spots against them. The transport hub loomed ahead, a cluster of steel and energy shielding, a vital artery feeding the war machine. Rourke worked fast, fingers dancing over a stolen interface, feeding false data into the security systems. "Give me 90 seconds. They didn't have 90 seconds. A sentry drone pivoted toward them, metallic limbs unfolding, weapon charging. Before it could react, a pulse round tore through its casing, severing its core. Elias lowered his rifle. "Faster, Rourke." Almost there. The security grid flickered, then collapsed. The outer defenses dropped. Alarms remained silent. Elias moved first, weaving through the corridors of the installation. The guards were few, unprepared, a mere formality. The first fell before he could raise his weapon. The second turned just in time to see the knife, then saw nothing at all. The team spread out, planting charges, marking targets. Every movement was calculated, every action taken with the quiet efficiency of men who had nothing left but purpose. Then the alarms screamed. Elias cursed. They found the bodies. The transport bay lit up as Yevothan soldiers poured in, rifles raised, the air thick with the hum of charging plasma. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, but they did not hesitate. The first shot rang out, then another. Shadows danced between crates, muzzle flashes illuminating the carnage in brief, violent bursts. Cole took out a flanking soldier, rolling behind cover as plasma scorched the ground where he had stood. This was supposed to be quiet. Adjust accordingly. Elias shot back, his own rifle spitting fire. Rourke detonated the first charge. The blast ripped through the facility, flames swallowing the main fuel reserves. Secondary explosions followed in quick succession, shaking the ground, sending debris crashing from above. The transport hub began to die. A Yevithan officer, taller than the rest, advanced through the chaos, unshaken, eyes locked on Elias. The alien's voice was calm, almost disappointed. "Survivors." Elias raised his rifle. "More than you think." The officer lunged, faster than something that size should move. Elias fired, the rounds sparking against armor. The Yevithan closed the distance, backhanding him with bone-crushing force. The world blurred, pain lanced through his ribs. He hit the ground hard. The officer raised his weapon. A shot rang out. The officer staggered. A hole burned through the side of his skull. He dropped without ceremony. Cole stood behind him, rifle still smoking. "You're welcome." Elias pulled himself to his feet. The facility was collapsing. Fire licked at the walls. Supply crates detonated in sequence. The transport lines were crippled. The mission was done. As they slipped back into the ruins, alarms still echoing behind them, a new sound crackled through Elias' earpiece. Not human, not Yevithan, something else. Static. Then a whisper. Elias froze. Cole frowned. "What is it?" Elias didn't answer. He just listened. The ruins stretched endlessly, a graveyard of steel and silence where cities had once stood. Elias Vance led his team through the shattered remains, moving in the rhythm of men who had learned to live in the margins of a world that no longer belonged to them. The success of the transport hub raid had rippled outward, a disturbance in the Yevithan's calculated order. They were searching now, sending patrols into the ruins, combing through the ashes for ghosts they had once ignored. But it wasn't the enemy's movements that had Elias on edge. It was the voice. The transmission had been brief, garbled, crawling with static. Not Yevithan, not human, something else. Something that had spoken in a language not meant to be understood, yet somehow familiar in a way that set his teeth on edge. He hadn't told the others. Not yet. There were enough problems without adding an unknown to the equation. Cole adjusted the strap of his rifle as they climbed through a collapsed overpass. "You think they figured it out yet?" "They know something's wrong," Elias muttered. Rourke glanced over her shoulder. "Wrong isn't the same as knowing what's coming." Elias didn't respond. He wasn't sure what was coming. Their path led them deeper into the underground network, through tunnels forgotten by both human and alien. The remnants of the old world lingered here. Trains frozen in rust, advertisements for products no one would ever buy again, echoes of lives reduced to nothing but dust. Their sanctuary lay beneath it all, where stolen technology flickered with stolen power. The bunker was a contradiction. Ancient concrete and scavenged alien tech fused into something neither human nor Yevithan. It was survival built from the bones of conquest. Inside, the team dispersed. Some collapsed onto makeshift bedding, exhaustion catching up. Others moved toward consoles, scanning for enemy activity, preparing for what came next. Elias didn't stop moving. His thoughts pressed against the edge of something he couldn't yet name. He found himself staring at the communication logs, running the transmission again. It played back in garbled fragments, words stretching and twisting into something just beyond understanding. He should have ignored it. The war was with the Yevithan, not whatever else lurked beyond the wreckage. But war had taught him a simple truth. Ignoring the unknown never made it less dangerous. A flicker on the console caught his attention. A new signal, stronger this time. He hesitated, then tapped into the frequency. Static. Then the voice, a whisper, crawling through the speakers. "You are not alone." The words scraped against something deep in his mind, a wrongness that didn't belong in sound. He shut it off, breath tight in his chest. Cole's voice pulled him back. What the hell was that? Elias turned to find the sergeant watching him, arms crossed. He exhaled slowly. "Something we weren't meant to hear." Cole frowned. "And yet here we are." Before Elias could respond, the bunker's warning system pulsed red. Motion sensors triggered, external feeds flickering to life. The patrols had found them. Yevithan forces moved through the ruins above, their formations precise, their weapons ready. They weren't searching anymore. They were hunting. Elias moved without hesitation. Positions. Now. The bunker shifted from a place of rest to a battlefield in seconds. Rifles were loaded, defenses activated. The ghosts of Earth preparing to remind their conquerors that the dead did not rest easily. The first explosion shattered the outer defenses, sending dust and fire through the corridors. The Yevithan moved in the wake of the blast, their weapons slicing through the dark. Elias fired first, dropping the lead soldier before the others could react. The narrow corridors turned the battle into a brutal, close-quarters fight. The enemy was stronger, faster, but the humans had something they did not: desperation. The kind of desperation that made men fight like demons. Rourke triggered a charge, sending debris cascading into the passageway, forcing the Yevithan to funnel into a kill zone. Cole emptied his clip into the choke point, stepping back only long enough to reload. The battle was not one of survival. It was attrition. Every enemy that fell was replaced by another. Elias moved through the chaos, pulse steady, mind sharp. Then the air shifted. A sound crawled through the gunfire, something deeper, older. The walls trembled, not from the battle, but from something else. The power flickered, the stolen Yevithan consoles spasming with unreadable code. Then the voice, not through speakers, not through radios, came from everywhere, from nowhere. "You took fire from the stars and became something else." The Yevithan hesitated. For the first time since the war began, they faltered. Their movements broke, the seamless unity of their assault cracking under the weight of something they did not understand. Elias did not hesitate. He moved, gunfire ripping through the disoriented enemy, carving through their ranks before they could recover. The others followed, pressing the advantage. The battle turned, the hunters becoming the hunted. Then silence. The bunker was a ruin, bodies scattered in the dim light. Smoke curled through the air, blood pooled in the cracks of the old world. The survivors stood amidst it, breath heavy, waiting for another wave that did not come. Rourke's voice was quiet. They ran. Elias didn't speak. His mind was still ringing with the words, with the way they had not been spoken but felt. The Yevithan had never run before. They did not retreat. They did not break. But they had heard the voice, and for the first time they had known fear. Cole exhaled, looking at the wreckage. "I don't know what that was." Elias nodded. "Neither do they." The battle was over. But the war had changed. The fires still burned in the wreckage of the bunker, twisting shadows against the cracked concrete. Smoke clung to the air, thick with the scent of burned flesh and scorched metal. The Yevithan had fled, abandoning the battlefield in a way they never had before. Not for a tactical retreat, not for regrouping. They had run. Elias Vance stood in the aftermath, rifle slack in his grip, pulse steady but mind unsettled. Whatever had spoken in the darkness had not come from the Yevithan. It had reached into the battle, into their minds, and broken something fundamental in their enemy. It had whispered, and the conquerors of Earth had known fear. Cole paced beside the bodies, eyes scanning the carnage with the look of a man searching for answers that weren't there. "They don't do that," he muttered. "They don't just break and run." "They did," Rourke said quietly. She was watching the distant skyline, where the shattered remains of the Yevithan transport hub still glowed from their earlier assault. The war had shifted, but into what none of them could say. Elias glanced at the stolen consoles, their alien text scrolling erratically, glitching with unreadable static. The signal was still there, pulsing beneath the surface. It had spoken once. It would speak again. And if it had the power to terrify the Yevithan, then it was something worse than them. The transmission spiked. Not a voice this time. Presence. The air in the bunker grew thick, charged with something unseen. The lights dimmed, not from power failure, but as if the darkness itself had weight. Then the whisper, "You are awake." It wasn't sound. It was an intrusion, pressing against the walls of their thoughts. Rourke flinched, her breath hitching. Cole clenched his jaw, gripping his rifle as if a weapon could stop something that wasn't there. Elias stayed still. He had felt fear before, had let it carve him into something sharper. He refused to let it take hold now. The whisper curled through their minds, folding over itself, neither language nor voice. "You are not as they made you. You are more." The words rang with something deeper than understanding, something Elias knew to be true before he even questioned it. Humanity should have died. The war should have ended with them buried beneath the rubble of their own world. The Yevithan had done this before to others, to species whose names were already dust in the cosmos. But humanity had not died. They had changed. The ruins had not buried them. They had made them into something else. The presence stirred, as if acknowledging his thoughts. "They thought you weak. You let them believe it." Cole's voice was sharp. "What are you?" The whisper was neither kind nor cruel. "The reason they ran." The bunker trembled. The consoles flickered violently, code unraveling into nothingness. Then silence. The weight lifted. The darkness receded. The air was still again. Rourke let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Cole exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. Elias stared at the console, at the empty static where the presence had been. He knew, without knowing how, that it was gone. But it had left something behind. A knowing. A certainty. The Yevithan had been the end of humanity. Or so they had believed. But the end had only been a threshold. Something had taken notice of what remained. Something older. Something watching. Cole looked at him, waiting for the unspoken question to be answered. Elias slung his rifle over his shoulder, stepping toward the exit. The war had not ended. It had only just begun.